In this video, we're going to talk about DISC as it relates to the personalities of the roles that you're trying to fill in your real estate business. That and more, stay tuned. Hi, I'm Mikesh, and on this channel, I share tools and strategies that I use personally to scale my real estate business and become a top producer in my market. Okay, welcome back. And just to recap, in part one of this DISC series, we talked about what is DISC and what are those 4 different personality types. Then in part 2, we dove into specifically how do these different personality types show up in our interactions when we're dealing with clients on the buy and sell side in real estate. So if you missed either of those 2 videos, definitely go back and watch them now, because this is going to be a continuation in the 3rd and final video that I have for you on DISC personality assessment and the profiles, and how do we bring all this together and how do we assemble a real estate team with all the different roles so that we can build a team around these personality profiles for maximum effectiveness and client engagement. So first and foremost, I want to identify what are the different roles that are commonly found in a real estate business. And those roles are going to be that of a buyer's agent, so an agent that primarily works with buyers, that of an agent of a listing agent, so somebody who works mostly with or primarily with listings. And what I found is there's a real difference there in how those are served. So we'll talk about those. We'll also talk about an office administrative person or transaction coordinator. And we'll talk about that of an office manager, a sales manager, and inside sales agent. So we'll cover all of those and what are the ideal personality profiles in this video. So let's start off with buyer agent. So I've been running real estate teams and companies now for almost 20 years, and I found a definite personality profile that shines in this role. And that would be the DISC personality profile of somebody that's a high I with a good amount of D. So their D is less than their I, they're a high I first, but they do have some D in them. And that's going to be important for them to get the sale. The reason I found this personality profile to work so good in this role is because people are generally happy-go-lucky when it comes to buying real estate. They're excited. They're not really coming off and paying the real estate commission because it's factored into the listing, and the sellers are offering to pay the buyer agency fee. So it's really just a pleasant experience. And those that are high I's tend to be able to influence and build rapport with people and make them feel at ease the most. Now, doesn't mean that I haven't had people of all different personality types work in this role and be successful in this role. But what I found is over time in doing this with, probably well over 100 different buyers agents that have worked for me at this point, the ones that have a natural tendency to be successful without a lot of extra work or effort, the ones that just fit the role perfectly for the most part are people that have a high I with some D personality profile. So when you're interviewing and you're looking at filling this role in your company, you want to make sure that you assess them and just know that if you find somebody that's a high I D, they're probably going to need less training, have an easier learning curve to being successful within this role. Okay, let's switch gears now and talk about a listing agent or an agent when they're working with a listing client. A lot of people think, okay, we're just going to call it salespeople and say there's one size fits all for salespeople that's best. And I disagree with that, because when it comes to being a good listing agent, I think it's the inverse of what I find to be a naturally good buyer's agent. And that would be somebody that is a high D with a good amount of I. This happens to be my personality profile. So I always loved working with people on the listing side. It was just a natural fit for me. I felt like I could get to the bottom line, get to the end result easier, faster than I could on the buy side, where you got to take a lot of time showing people houses. You might spend days and days and days in the car with them. And it's just a longer sales cycle. Whereas on the listing side, once somebody gets into your funnel and you go out there and meet with them, you're really, showing them what is your value proposition? How are you going to market their home? And then helping them get the home priced right. And that's where I think it takes a lot more D than it does on the buyer side, where a lot of times you're more or less like an order taker. You're showing them the homes, and there's things that you can do to influence that process and make it smoother, shorter, all of that. But for the most part, agents on the buy side, they're just having a great time with their clients, and they're going out there and they're finding a home, and their clients are making an offer on it and they're getting it done. So they do need some D, but not as much as on the seller side. On the seller side, a lot of times you're having to have difficult conversations. Reasons why people are selling aren't always the best reasons. It's not always a happy time for them. You're having to navigate that. You might have a husband and wife that are at odds about where it should be or why they're making this move in the first place. So you're having to be a little bit more of D, a little bit more of a driver, and a little bit more authoritative when you're presenting yourself on the listing side. So for that reasons, I find that a D personality type with some good amount of I works best. Again, with the caveat that I've had people with all different personality types do well here, but this is the one that I've seen far and away shine. I've even had buyer agents that are excellent buyer agents that are IDs come over to the listing side of the business and find that they don't really like it, that it doesn't feel as good to them, that they love clients that are happy all the time. And a lot of times when you're dealing with sellers or you're on the listing side of the business, those circumstances and situations may not always be happy and pleasant, but you got to be able to help them get through that and get the end goal, which is to get the property sold. And for that, I find a DI works best on the selling side. Now, in sticking with sales related roles for just a second, I would like to also talk to you about inside sales and what makes a good inside sales agent. So for this role, I found that what works best for an inside salesperson is somebody that has a DS personality type. So again, we're leading with the D because they got to be bottom lines, they got to be results focused, they got to be goal centric, and they got to have difficult conversations. A lot of times on the inside sales role, they're having call after call after call after call, and they got to be able to maintain that for a long period of time. So that's where the S comes in. This person is looking for some stability. They're looking for some consistency. Their role is very limited, which helps that S. It's like, hey, this is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do all the time. But then you got to also backfill that role with a compensation plan that's going to speak to that DS. And what I found works really good for that is you're offering a base salary, something that the S can get there satisfied, like, hey, I'm getting this consistent stability income. But then you got to have enough of a bonus that's going to actually cause them to go the extra mile. It's going to lighten up that D inside of them and give them an opportunity where, hey, the sky's the limit, but you're going to have to do these things consistently and consistently well over time. So I found that the people that last the longest in that role, that do the best job for me, are DS personality types. And I would say that in this role, more than any other role, it's a very close second to SD. So somebody that leads with S and also has some D can also be great for this role. But if I had to pick between the two, I would take somebody that leads with D and has a good amount of S. That's what's worked best for me. You just have to make sure that you're getting somebody at a stage of life where if they're a high D, you're not going to have a limited span in this role. Like if they were younger at a high DS versus if they were older or later in their years and they were a high DS, I would go for the later in their years every time. And I think you're going to find that they're going to stay satisfied in that role for longer. So especially if you can find somebody who has past inside sales experience and they can show a track record of being in that role for a while and they're a high D with some good S, you're going to find that to be an amazing hire because they're going to stay longer. And the learning curve in this role, and really it's not so much the learning curve, it's the time you're going to have to invest to get them up to speed on your systems and your way of doing things. You're not going to want to have a revolving door in this role. So definitely when you look at this role, you're looking to hire a DS or maybe an S with a good amount of D. But that's who I would want to find for an inside sales role. Okay, switching over to the in-office, to the more office admin, or I like to call them transaction coordinator role. Who are we looking for? What kind of personality? What do you think? What do you think based on all we've learned about this so far? What do you think would be a good personality profile for a transaction coordinator? Interested to know what you think? Put it in the comments below. But really what I found works best for a transaction coordinator is a CI personality type. So let me explain. When it comes to transaction coordination and getting somebody safely from the time they go under contract to the closing and making sure that all those T's are crossed and those I's are dotted. Obviously, we're going to want a detailed person. Details are going to be super important in this role. So we want to make sure that the details get right, that nothing gets missed, because that's going to reflect poorly on us salespeople or us team leaders or broker owners. We want that transaction to be smooth. And the thing that's going to lead to a smooth transaction is not missing out on any of those details. So first and foremost, I'm looking for somebody with a high C personality type. If you get somebody that applies for this role that's a high D or a high I personality type, beware. The high S's can do it, because it's not rocket science what they're doing and they can stay steady. But you definitely gonna have to question a high D or a high I in this personality type, because the D's are just gonna want to get it done and they're gonna miss details left and right. I never want to see myself as a high D in a role that involves a lot of detail, because I tend to just kind of want to get it done, want to skim through it, get over it, and I miss things. And those things are going to reflect poorly on the transaction and they're going to mean a lot to the client. So you don't want that. The other reason I don't want a high I is because they'll be chatty Cathy all the time. They'll be talking nonstop. They'll be having a good time in the role, and they will have a good time at the expense of those details and what needs to get done. So I like CI or even CS, but I like CI more than CS, and here's why. This is a person that's stepping into what could be an emotionally charged, and I'm not saying emotionally charged in negative context. It could be negative, but it could be positive. But nonetheless, a real estate transaction is a very important deal, both for the person, the client that's buying or selling the home, and also for the agent that's gotten this client to a point where now there's commission dollars attached to the outcome. And it's very important that we see that through smoothly for the agent and for the client, because emotions are charged at this point. So that CI, that I part of the equation, is going to be in good rapport with the agent and good rapport with the buyer or seller client. And I find that the I really helps bring it all together and keep things moving in a smooth direction that is going to have a favorable outcome. So having that I, having that people, that personality that jives and connects with people is going to keep those emotions really stable throughout the process. So for the role of a transaction coordinator or even an office admin that's dealing with the agents, I like the CI, because I want those details attended to. I want to make sure that we create raving fans from our clients. And I also want that interpersonality to shine through and for the people that feel served. What can happen sometimes when I've had people that are CSs or SCs in this role, everything kind of becomes monotone and just, everything is like da, 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 and they account for all the details, but there's no personality there, and therefore there's no connection felt by the client, whether it's, the buyer or seller client, or whether it's the agent that's working with that person, and that's a value that I'm offering to that agent. You want them to feel a connection there as well. So for this role, transaction coordinator, office admin, I like CI. Now, let's talk about some of the other positions in an office. And one could be office manager. So this is person that's high level, just making sure the office is running smoothly. They probably have people underneath them, like transaction coordinators that are making sure all the details are right. So the less detail intensive position, details are still important. But I see this person as the office manager being more of an SI. So somebody that can go in and do the same job well every day. So they like the stability of the office and the salary and the environment. But they also are a connector and people like them, and they're making everybody feel comfortable. So I like SI for office manager, unless your office manager is really an office manager and a sales manager. That would be a little bit different. But if I'm speaking of somebody who's generally there just to make sure the office is running smoothly, I like SI for this role. We'll talk about that of a sales manager next. All right, now we're talking sales manager. This is the person that's really going to drive forward the company. And for this role, I could go two ways. I like ID and I like DI. The reason I'm okay with an ID in this role is because I really want this person to be, somebody that rallies the troops and really gets people all moving in the same direction. And for that, the I in the ID works really well. The reason I'm okay with an ID and not just a DI in this role is because I'm a DI and I'm overseeing all of this. So if this person's working for me and they're a sales manager, I can handle an ID or a DI in this role. If you're not a high D and you're hiring a sales manager, then I would suggest that you want your sales manager to be a DI. They're going to have to be the D that you're not. They're going to have to be the bad guy, and they're going to have to drive results if you're not the person that's really over all of that, making sure that happens. So analyze yourself. That's something I said in video too, is like really know what you are and what some of your limitations are in your personality profile as it relates to these different roles. If you're not a high D, then I would definitely say that your sales manager needs to be a DI. If you are a high D, I think you can get away with either an ID sales manager or a DI sales manager. So hopefully that's helpful and you start to see how these different pieces will work together. But also just know, one of the things that we learned, we did entree leadership with Dave Ramsey, and it was a really eye-opening experience. Dave Ramsey and his organization was just on a crazy growth trajectory. This was back in 2013, back when you still did entree leadership with Dave Ramsey personally. It was really cool. He took us to his favorite places in town. He took us to his house. We just really got to interact with him and really see how he grew this amazing company that at the time had about 400 employees, and they're much bigger now even. But one of the things that I really took away from that experience was how they used DISC in their business and how they interworked with each other based on the DISC personality profile. And one of the take homes from that trip was every single employee at his company, every single person that had an office area, cubicle, a space, what was posted in that space was their DISC chart. And it was really cool because it was a reminder to everybody that worked there that, hey, when you go interact with this other person, understand that they have a DISC personality and so do you. And it was a reminder to look at that and say, okay, this person is a high C. I need to make sure that I'm giving them information and interacting with them in a way that's going to be favorable to this relationship and to this outcome that I'm trying to achieve. So we came back and we put that in all of our work areas, and it really helped us solidify the importance of talking to each other and recognizing the differences in these personalities. Now, I'll say this in closing. It doesn't matter what your personality is. You can be excellent in any role that you decide to be excellent in. But if we're talking about what are some unconscious natural abilities that you have, that's what I tried to highlight in this video, is like, these are people that are going to find it easier to excel in their role at an unconscious level because of the activities and things that they're doing. If you take somebody that's very detail oriented and you put them in a sales role, what I've seen over years and years and years is that it's harder for them to excel in a sales role because they're so bogged down in the details. And if you take somebody that's very sales role friendly in their personality and you put them in a very detail intensive position, they're probably not going to find the enjoyment and fulfillment in that role that somebody has a natural tendency to be all about those things will find. So hopefully that's helpful. I would encourage you to go back to your own team or brokerage right now that you've gone through this training and you've had this awareness, and really ask yourself, like, who are the people that I have? Maybe give them the assessment too and see where they're at, and maybe it'll bring some awareness to maybe why they're thriving in that role or struggling in that role, and you can make some decisions based upon that information. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate it. And if you got value from this video, all I ask is that you like or subscribe and catch my content that's going to continue to come out. And I hope that I can serve you through this. And if I can reach out to you, if there's any other way that I can help you, just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to provide value in any way that I can to help move your business forward. Thanks so much, and I enjoyed being with you through this series.